$16,200,000. That's what William Post won on the Pennsylvania lottery in 1988. Within a year, he was more than $1 million in debt. His own brother hired a hitman to try to kill him for a piece of what was left. By the time he died, he was living on Social Security checks, saying the lottery was the worst thing that ever happened to him. And he is just one name on a list of 11 people who had more money than most of us will ever see, and somehow ended up with nothing. Before we get into these stories, I want you to actually think about this for a second. If you won $10, $20, $30 million tomorrow, what is the very first thing you would do? Not the fantasy answer, the real one. Type it in the comments right now. I read every single one of them. And as we go through these cases, I want you to guess along with me. Before I tell you how each person lost it all, try to predict what you think destroyed them. Was it family? Was it greed? Was it people they trusted? Drop your guess before the reveal. And if you know someone who just came into money, an inheritance, a settlement, a bonus, a windfall of any kind, send them this video before they make one of these exact same mistakes. It might be the most useful thing you share with them all year. Now, if this kind of story pulls you in, the real ones, the ones with real names and real receipts, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe. I put together stories like this every week, cases that sound made up but are completely documented and verified. It helps the channel more than you know. Okay, let's get into it. Let's go back to William Post, because his story sets the tone for almost everyone else on this list. He won that $16 million jackpot in Pennsylvania in the late 80s. Almost immediately, a former girlfriend sued him, claiming she was owed a share because they'd had an agreement to split any winnings. She won a third of it. Then his brother, the one who allegedly hired someone to kill him, was hoping to inherit a chunk of what remained. Post survived, but the damage to his family and his finances was already done. He invested in a restaurant and a used car lot with his other siblings. Both failed. Within a year, he was in debt. He later said something that stuck with a lot of people. That he was much happier when he was broke before the lottery, because at least then, nobody was trying to hurt him for money. Here's my honest take on why this keeps happening, and you'll hear me come back to this theme again and again in this video. A sudden windfall doesn't just change your bank account. It changes how every single person around you treats you. Family members who never asked you for anything suddenly need help with a mortgage. Old friends resurface. And most winners have zero financial literacy and zero preparation for that kind of pressure. It's not stupidity. It's psychology colliding with math. And the math always wins eventually. Take Evelyn Adams from New Jersey. In 1985, she won the New Jersey lottery. Then, incredibly, she won it again in 1986. Combined, she pulled in around $5.4 million, an almost impossible feat of luck. But Adams had a serious problem with gambling, and instead of the money protecting her from that habit, it fed it. She poured much of her winnings into slot machines in Atlantic City. She also gave large sums away to family and friends who asked for help. By the mid-1990s, she was living in a trailer, telling reporters that everyone wanted a piece of her winnings, and she didn't know how to say no. 2 lottery wins in 2 years, and she ended up with less than when she started. Now think about that for a second. Winning once is already a 1 in millions shot. She won twice, and still lost it all. If luck alone was the answer to financial security, her story would have ended completely differently. Let's talk about Denise Rossi, because this one is less about greed and more about what people do when they're terrified of losing money they haven't even fully processed yet. In 1996, Rossi won $1.3 million in the California lottery. Instead of telling her husband, she filed for divorce 11 days after collecting the winnings and never disclosed the money during the proceedings. Under California community property law, that money should have been split. Years later, her ex-husband found out completely by accident and took her to court. Because she had concealed marital assets, a judge awarded him the entire $1.3 million as a penalty. Every single dollar. She didn't lose the money to bad investments or family drama. She lost it to her own decision to hide it. If you're keeping score of these stories so far, drop a comment on which one has shocked you the most up to this point, because trust me, it only gets heavier from here. Jack Whittaker's story might be the most tragic one on this entire list, because his downfall wasn't really about bad spending. In December 2002, Whittaker, a businessman from West Virginia, won $314 million in the Powerball. At the time, one of the largest single-ticket jackpots in American history. He was already financially comfortable before winning, running a successful construction company. But almost immediately, the chaos started. Thieves broke into his car and stole a briefcase with a large amount of cash inside. He was repeatedly targeted for lawsuits, scams, and theft. Strangers showed up at his house asking for money. Then came the personal tragedy that really defined his story. His granddaughter, Brandy, who he adored and showered with gifts and cash after the win, died in 2004 under circumstances connected to drug use that many close to the family believe escalated because of sudden, unsupervised access to money. Whittaker himself later said publicly that he wished he had torn up the winning ticket. By the end, his marriage collapsed, his business suffered, and most of the fortune was gone through theft, lawsuits, and family devastation. This is the one that really gets me, because it proves something important. Sometimes it's not the winner who self-destructs. Sometimes the money creates danger and temptation for everyone around them, and the winner ends up paying for it in ways no amount of financial planning could have prevented. And speaking of danger, Abraham Shakespeare's story takes it even further. In 2006, Shakespeare, a warehouse worker from Florida, won $30 million, choosing a lump sum payout of about $17 million after taxes. Word got around fast, and a woman named Doris D.D. Moore inserted herself into his life, claiming she wanted to write a book about him and help him manage his sudden fame. Instead, prosecutors say she systematically took control of his finances, convincing him to sign over rights and assets. In 2009, Shakespeare disappeared. His family reported him missing, but police initially treated it as a low-priority case, partly because he had a history of loaning out cash and reportedly telling people he wished he'd never won. In 2010, his body was found buried under a concrete slab behind a home connected to Moore. She was convicted of first-degree murder in 2012 and sentenced to life in prison. Shakespeare didn't lose his fortune to bad decisions. He lost his life to someone who saw his winnings as a target. If you're starting to notice a pattern here, you're right. In story after story, the money itself doesn't disappear randomly. It becomes a magnet for people who see an opportunity, and the winner rarely sees the danger coming until it's already too late. Uroj Khan's case is one of the strangest and darkest on this list. In 2012, Khan, a Chicago businessman originally from India, won $1 million on an Illinois scratch-off ticket. He chose the lump sum, which came out to roughly $425,000 after taxes. The very next day, before he had even collected the money, he suddenly died. Initially, the death was ruled natural causes, but a family member requested further testing, and toxicology results later revealed lethal levels of cyanide in his system. His death was reclassified as a homicide. To this day, the case remains formally unsolved, though investigators have looked closely at people in his inner circle. Khan never even got the chance to spend a single dollar of his winnings. The money itself may have cost him his life before he ever saw it. Now let's shift over to the UK, because American winners definitely don't have a monopoly on these stories. Callie Rogers became the youngest lottery winner in UK history when she won £1.9 million in 2003 at just 16 years old. Legally allowed to claim the prize despite her age, she went on an extended spending spree that included multiple breast augmentation surgeries, expensive vacations, cars, and gifts for friends and family. By her early 20s, she has said publicly that the money was almost completely gone, and she later spoke openly about struggling with the pressure and attention that came with being a teenage multi-millionaire with no life experience to prepare her for it. Here's my take on her case specifically. A 16-year-old shouldn't be handed nearly £2 million with zero structure around it. That's not a criticism of her. That's a criticism of a system that let it happen. Financial maturity typically doesn't fully develop until the mid-20s at the earliest, and she was essentially asked to manage adult-level wealth before she'd even finished being a teenager. Michael Carroll's story earned him the nickname the Lotto Lout across British tabloids, and honestly, it's hard to argue with the label. In 2002, at 19 years old, Carroll won £9.7 million. Over the following years, he spent it on drugs, prostitutes, lavish parties, and reportedly organized demolition derbies, where he'd deliberately wreck expensive cars for entertainment. By 2010, he publicly stated he was down to his last few £1,000s and eventually returned to manual labor jobs to support himself. He later gave interviews reflecting on how the money enabled the worst version of himself, rather than improving his life in any meaningful way. Willie Hurt's case is one of the more devastating examples of addiction meeting sudden wealth. In 1989, Hurt, from Lansing, Michigan, won $3.1 million. Within roughly 2 years, the money was gone, spent largely funding a serious cocaine addiction. His marriage collapsed during that same period, and in 1991, he was charged in connection with a murder case. Hurt's story is frequently cited in financial literacy discussions as one of the clearest examples of how a pre-existing addiction can accelerate total financial and personal collapse once large sums of unearned money enter the picture. Janet Leigh's story shows that even generosity, when it's not managed carefully, can lead to the same outcome as reckless spending. In 1993, Leigh won $18 million. Unlike a lot of names on this list, she didn't blow it on luxury for herself. She donated enormous amounts to political campaigns, universities, and community causes, and she genuinely wanted to help people around her. But she gave without any real structure or long-term financial planning. And by 2001, less than a decade later, she filed for bankruptcy, reportedly left with only a few $100s in personal assets. Her case is a reminder that losing everything doesn't always come from selfishness. Sometimes it comes from selflessness without a plan behind it. And finally, Sharon Tirabassi from Ontario, Canada. In 2004, she won $10.5 million Canadian dollars. She used portions of it to buy a house, help family members, travel extensively, and support friends financially. But within about a decade, the money was essentially gone, and she was reportedly back to living in rental housing and taking public transit, the same life she had before the win. She later spoke publicly and said if she could go back, she would have invested a large portion immediately instead of trying to help everyone around her all at once. So that's all 11. 2 divorces gone wrong, 1 murder, 1 still unsolved poisoning, multiple addictions, and more than 1 family completely torn apart. And if you ask me, after going through every single one of these cases, the common thread isn't bad luck, and it isn't even really bad spending habits. It's the complete absence of preparation. None of these people had months or years to plan how they'd handle sudden wealth. It landed on them overnight, and overnight, everyone around them found out too. Family, friends, strangers, even people willing to kill for a piece of it. The lesson underneath all of this isn't really about lottery tickets. It's about what happens to anyone, you, me, a coworker, a neighbor, when money arrives faster than the wisdom needed to handle it. Financial experts who study these cases consistently point to the same fix, and it's almost boringly simple. Wait before you touch a dollar of it. Build a team of professionals you trust, a lawyer, a fiduciary financial advisor, and someone completely outside your circle of family and friends who has no emotional stake in the outcome. Set boundaries early, because the people who ask you for money in year 1 are rarely the same people who stood by you in year 10. So, here's my question for you, and I actually want an honest answer in the comments. Out of everyone we just talked about, which case do you think you would have avoided, and which one do you think could genuinely happen to almost anyone, even someone smart, even someone careful? Let me know down below. If this story kept you hooked until the very end, do me a favor and hit like right now. It genuinely helps this channel keep telling stories like this one. Subscribe if you want more real, deeply researched cases like these delivered every single week. And if there's someone in your life who just came into money, or who you know struggles with impulse spending, send them this video today. It might be the difference between them building something that lasts and becoming case number 12 on a list just like this one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.